Well, hello there. It's another day. I'm Jim Harrington.
And I am Bill Knight. Happy Monday. Well, the weekend is gone, and as usual, they made a mess for us as far as
Yes.
the news goes. But, I say they made a mess. All they've really done is just they sling their mud on the weekend. It's a mudsling weekend, and then,
It's a mud-slinging weekend. They did that. They try to make Trump look as ineffective and as unpopular as possible. I say that because they came out with a Fox poll that's supposed to be a little different, more credible. A Fox poll saying that his popularity in certain areas was down significantly, the lowest in his. He's only been in office. It'll be 100 days on Wednesday. 100 days on Wednesday. So he hasn't even been in office 100 days in this administration, yet they're trying to make it sound like he's been there for 4 years, Bill.
Let me just put it in perspective. His lowest point is still higher than Biden could ever dream of.
I agree. And by the way, I don't think it's what the polls say it is. I think the polls are manipulated. You know what? I keep asking myself, why is it that when they have the elections and I realize how far off the polls are, I always say to myself, the polls are useless and I'm not going to pay any more attention to those polls. Then, as the dust settles from the election and they keep throwing more polls out there, you find yourself almost automatically starting to believe some of these polls, which based upon the election, are ineffective.
All right? So do an experiment. Turn off the media for a couple of days, and because you can live without it. I mean, if you see something major happening or hear the story, you can look up that story. But just turn it off for a few days and just observe. Maybe take a drive around town and maybe out into the country. I'm going to ask you real quick, how many new Trump-supporting signs do you see? And it's a lot.
I know.
Versus anything that's liberal or Democrat. And the only thing you might see democratically is any elections coming up right now for some little local seat. But other than that, you see nothing that's negative to Trump. I see positive. And when they say they can sit there and tell me about a rally that was, a half a mile away or 2 miles away. Well, I was just down that way and there was nobody there. So, okay, you're manipulating everything. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't get negative protest crowds or they bust people in, or maybe there's a group, but as a whole, it's not there. So these polls, who are they asking? Or are they making this crap up?
Over the weekend, Cory Booker, Adam Schiff, Hakeem Jeffries, they had a protest rally on the steps of the Capitol. It was like a sit-in on the steps of the Capitol. And all of these Democrats, and the crowd of Democrats grew as the day progressed. Because
it was all negative thing.
All they did was complain about this administration and how bad it was and how bad Trump was and how he was bringing us back to the dark times of our country and all this nonsense. And the crowd was at times halfway decent because they were more curiosity seekers than anything else. And I was thinking to myself, okay, the media is covering this and it's getting decent coverage. I wonder how much coverage the media will give President Trump tomorrow when he does a rally in Michigan, when he does a 100-day rally in Michigan, which I think will probably be filled to the rafters.
Oh, he's got the rally in Michigan, and then Thursday for the graduating class at the University of Alabama, he's going to be there. Now the Democrats are upset that he's going to go on a college campus and talk.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'd be upset if your liberal blankety blank 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 got on there and did some talking. Speaking of talking, if you like what you're hearing, please like and share our show. We would appreciate that.
So on Thursday, he will be attending the University of Alabama, doing a commencement speech. And I was reading the article, Bill, and it was college Democrats are upset. But they don't go in the article and say, but the college Republicans and the independents are thrilled that he's going to be here. They don't say that. They just say in the article, the Democrats are upset. And they said some of the nastiest stuff in the article. Let me see if I can find exactly what it was. It says, according to Campus Reform, President Trump will speak at the University of Alabama graduates on May 1st. College Democrats wasted no time responding. UACD is shocked and disgusted, this is a quote, and disgusted to learn that our unpopular, divisive, and authoritarian president will be involved in commencement for the graduating class of 2025. This is what college Dems posted in social media. This is not just embarrassing to the college, but it's an insult to the nation when these creeps start calling him unpopular, divisive, and authoritarian. The guy is doing what he said he would do. And most people, I truly think the Dems are just filled with anger and they haven't got any solutions. When they had that 12-hour rally on the Capitol steps yesterday, they were complaining like hell for 12 hours. But now one of them came out and said, but here's what we got to do. Here's what our answer is.
One lady broke into song, and she was singing about it, and I was going, boy, this tune that she's singing is familiar. And then, she said, they'll know we were so-and-so by our love. And I said, they took an old Maranatha song from maybe the 70s, and they turned it into a Democrat protest song. How?
Well, it was ineffective. It was ridiculous.
No,
when I saw
was terrible.
When I saw it this morning on Fox TV, on the morning show, as I was getting ready for this show, the host was saying how silly it was, how stupid it looked. I mean, this is on Fox, which is trying not to be totally conservative anymore. It used to be reliable, not so much right now. But even they couldn't believe how stupid this protest was and ineffective. Literally, folks, think about it. If you didn't see it, Cory Booker, Adam Schiff, Hakeem Jeffries, and a bunch of other Democrats sitting on the steps of the Capitol for 12 hours. And that was supposed to be like a protest? I mean, it looked like they were waiting for a bus that never showed up. So,
yeah.
I don't know, Bill. I wish the Democrats, if they're not happy with what's happening, tell us what you're going to do. Don't complain about what President Trump is doing. That can't be your whole message. I heard somebody say this morning that the move right now, as far as the Democrats are concerned, is they're going to do their best to get him impeached.
They're moving towards that.
Yeah, and this is the guy who hasn't been in office, like I said, for 100 days. And the Democrats, their answer to our problem right now is to impeach Trump. This is all they got. This is all they got. Impeach him.
Well, maybe we ought to take a page from their playbook. You want to impeach him? Then we're going to start impeaching Democrats one by one by one by one until you get beat upside the head.
It would make sense if the Republicans had the cojones to do that.
Oh, they don't.
Yeah, they don't.
Cory Booker, I mean, him doing his grandstanding, in front of the steps of the White House. I'm sitting there going, so he's doing this now to get attention because obviously his record-breaking filibuster, everybody's forgotten about until I just mentioned it.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody remembers it because it was an old hat trick. It's boring and it's stupid. And, well, so's Cory. So I rest my case.
Over the weekend also, another interesting thing happened. Did you hear about what happened in Vancouver over the weekend? A 30-year-old kid named Kai G. Adam Low is his name. Kai G. Adam Low was identified as the man who drove his vehicle through the Lapu-Lapu Filipino Festival in Vancouver on Saturday, killing 11 people with his car. Now, I don't know, call me crazy, but I would have thought they would have covered that like the remember that tragic incident in Wisconsin, was it Wisconsin, where they drove a car through a Christmas parade and killed the dancing grannies and stuff like that. I think it was 13 people, and for a while it was covered pretty significantly in the media. But it's almost like because it was in Vancouver, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't have an effect on us, so we're not going to cover it.
Sure, it does. It has an effect, and boy, the guy got back pretty quick too.
They also are amazing how fast they come out and say it wasn't an act of terrorism. Well, tell that to the people who got killed or their families.
Okay, define to me terrorism in that hate that he just did. What was it about?
Bill, they are just, it's like the default button on an engine. You press this if nothing else works. It wasn't an act of terrorism. Authorities say it wasn't an act of terrorism. Usually they say that before the cars have arrived at the scene. It's like the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, oh, don't worry about it. It wasn't an act of terrorism. They don't know. How do they know? I mean, they still, to this day, in New Orleans, they've dismissed that as being, it was a lone actor down in New Orleans who drove his car through the crowd. That wasn't an act of terrorism, even though the guy was sympathetic to the Muslim movement, and he was, I guess, he was trying to be involved with Al Qaeda. It's nothing to be seen here. It was just a random act.
Let me ask you a question.
Go
He
ahead.
flew there, obviously, did his deed, came back. That's a lot of money spent there.
Well, he wasn't. No, he was. I didn't see that part. Did you say he flew to Vancouver?
Well, no, I don't know.
No. I don't know whether he was a resident of Vancouver or
Okay.
whether he went up to Vancouver. So, but even
All right.
but even if he, they're trying to pass it off. There was another incident over the weekend too. I'm trying to find that story where a young man shot a bunch of kids at an event, and I can't find the. I got so much stuff to talk about today.
And there's so many, because I may have transposed one incident into another one, but either way, the simple fact is, all this protesting, all this hate going on,
Yeah.
it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on.
Well, there were two incidents, and I can't find the other story offhand. I'm sure I'll find it later when the show is over and I don't need it anymore. But there was a incident where a kid shot up a bunch of people at some event, and they passed it off as being a nothing to see here incident. Like, oh, he had mental issues. That's what they said. He had mental issues, and he was known to the authorities. Well, if he had mental issues and he was known to the authorities, why'd you let him walk around, and how did he get a hold of a gun? But they had video of that incident online, and they showed the video, and the video was taken not by professional photographers, but they were taken by just people who are onlookers, right? And you hear some of the people in the background saying, "Oh, look at the police! They're going after that poor boy. That poor boy had just wounded a ton of people." And I guess they shot him and they killed him, and but that's the default position nowadays. And so many. I saw something stupid this morning, Bill. We are in sometimes I think we're in crazy land. This morning, I was reading this article about an 18-year-old girl decides it's a good idea to get up on top of the roof of an Escalade Cadillac and start twerking at 40 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour. And when the car goes around the corner, when the Cadillac Escalade goes around the corner, and she's twerking, by the way, which is, in case you don't know what that is, that's when they bend over and kind of accentuate their derriere, their posterior, their gluteus maximus. Yes, that thing. When they're up on the roof, she's doing that dance and she's twerking, and the car goes around the corner and she goes flying off the roof of the Escalade.
Don't tell me there was a bus there.
No, not a bus. It was a lights and siren fire truck, which
There you go.
Which meant it was her last dance Wasn't there a song called "Last Dance"? I
Yeah,
think.
the
Yeah,
last dance for
yeah,
romance.
yeah,
This was the last dance for stupidity.
yeah, yeah. They ended up thinning out the gene pool in that move, and maybe that. I mean, what kind of a great genius thinks it's a good idea to get on top of the roof of a moving car and dance for the crowd? And then the driver must have been a numbskull too, because he had to know there was a woman on his roof, right?
Well, let me ask you a question, because you've seen people with limos before and they have a sunroof, so they might pop through and they're standing on the seats. But if the major portion of your body is through that sunroof, a turn of any sort, and they were
No,
probably a
Bill,
little.
Bill, I know what you're saying. That would make a little bit of sense because then you say, well, she wasn't totally out on the roof. But
No, but
the
if
way I
you're,
read the
if,
story, she climbed up on top of the roof.
yeah, I read the story too, and it said she was on top of the roof, and I'm going like, why would you do that? That means you had to get out of the car, either climb through the window while it was driving and do that, or you had to stop the car, get on the roof, and say, "Okay, I'm up here. Let's go." And that's beyond that's stupid crazy.
Now, call me crazy, but I don't think she was a Trump supporter. I'm just saying. I would doubt that she was a MAGA person, but she was out there doing her last dance. The sad part about that, it's sad that she got. It was a stupid thing for a young person to do. Really, really dumb. And you're sorry to see it come to a conclusion like that. Awful. But the thing I feel bad about is the guys in the fire truck. They're racing to help people. They're racing to put a problem out. And all of a sudden, they end up running over a young woman.
Well, the driver gets that stain on his life forever,
Oh.
let alone just as weighs heavy on his heart and his mind because he may not have agreed with the person that was there, but it's a life.
Yeah.
You take a life in any way by purpose or accident, that sticks with you forever.
It does. It does. You have a form of PTSD, I think, forever because of that action. And it wasn't his fault. He was just doing what he was supposed to do. The fire truck driver was operating responsibly. Like I said, lights and siren.
So
And
it's basically a case of manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter.
no,
right?
he won't even be charged, Bill. I don't.
Well, I would hope
Yeah.
not. It has happened in the past.
Oh,
though.
sure.
Because they go, well, we got to charge him with something, so we'll do that. Well, you don't want the that kind of stain on you, but you don't
Well-
even want to have the mental stain, which he's got. He can't. That doesn't.
And what would
fade
that do?
away.
Let's say hypothetically, some fathead prosecutor decides to charge him with manslaughter. All of a sudden now, if something happens in the future, you're going to have guys who are driving fire trucks saying, "I'm not going to drive fast through the street. I'm not going to race to the scene. I'll drive you there, but I'll drive the speed limit because I don't, So I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but if you make these guys who are supposed to be racing to the scene to help you, if you make them feel like they can be prosecuted for doing their job, it's going to have an effect eventually on you.
Yeah, and you know what? You don't even know that they were racing because obviously the fire truck was behind the Escalade or whatever, the Cadillac.
I thought it was going
And
the other
that-
way, Bill. They went around the corner. I thought the fire truck was coming one way. The Escalade was going around the corner.
See, I don't know.
And they
all I
passed.
saw was a picture of a fire truck, and that
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah, I what I read was that they were going by each other. A fire truck was approaching the intersection. They going around the intersection, and boom, bingo.
Yeah, but there's no record of that, and it doesn't matter. He was doing his duty. They were being stupid, and you play stupid games, you get stupid results, and that was an insane result. That's gonna weigh heavy on the guy that drove that truck.
Well, I just thought that's a sign of our times right now. She thought it would be a good idea to twerk on the roof of a moving Escalade. My God. Hey, Susan Rice, they're still attacking Pete Hegseth.
They'll continue until they want him. Do you remember in World War II? The Japanese, they had American ships, and they were like trophies. These are the ones we want to take.
Yeah.
He's like one of those right now.
Yeah.
He's like the Enterprise.
Yeah.
They want to sit there and dive bomb him until he sinks.
Yeah, that's true. So Susan Rice, who was ticked off because she was literally removed from a Pentagon advisory commission, she and about 12 other people. But I don't blame him for eliminating those jobs because they were holdovers from other administrations. And if you look at how they performed, it was lousy. I mean, they were there during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So did they advise the Pentagon that this would be a great way to pull out of Afghanistan? Just leave and leave all your stuff behind? So anyway, Pete Hegseth, he got rid of that whole advisory board and also the position that was held by advisor Susan Rice, who was around during Obama's administration and Biden's administration. Somebody who really thinks a lot of herself, and they deferred a lot to her. A lot of the activity in the Ukraine that we've gotten involved with was on her advice, they say. They say that she was responsible for a lot of it. And so if you think about the millions of people who have died in the Ukraine, some of it probably hangs on her because of her advice. But here's what she said about Pete Hegseth.
Well, if you're a white male Christian cisgender macho MAGA man, you can be as dumb as a rock and be deemed qualified to serve as Secretary of Defense. That's apparently what we've learned from this episode. But let's also be clear. There's a serious point here. DEI has been used as a slur to suggest that anybody who might be a woman, might be a person of color, might be a religious minority, might have a disability, might be a religious minority, might be a veteran or of Native descent, anybody who has benefited in any way, shape, or form from the notion that we all should be treated equally and that we should be viewed on the basis of our merits and not discounted because we happen to be a woman or happen to be a person of color. Anybody who, fits the mold of somebody who is not a white Christian cisgender male is by definition in this administration deemed inferior. That is the vast majority, Brian, of the people in this country.
Understand something. She's a wealthy woman, millionaire.
Yeah.
And she has lived in the lap of luxury most of her adult life. And so she's up there waving the race flag so easily because that's how they defer. That's how they deflect. They deflect criticism by saying, you're coming after me because I'm black and I'm a minority.
No. It has nothing to do with your race, your sexual identity, or anything. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that was a Democratic phrase. But either way, they went beyond that. All right? What they did is said, if you're DEI, you don't have to have these qualifications that she said. That's the rub, and the fact that these people get in there without properly being vetted to be qualified to handle that position, that's my only problem with it. Go back to the Reagan incident, the Reagan Airport incident with the Army helicopter and the traffic control tower. Well, it was DEI. That was the perfect DEI nightmare storm. Well, you had a young lady that was a pilot, but they withheld her name because they wanted to scrub her record because they didn't want you to know she was DEI. Well, what you needed to know is that she really wasn't probably vetted and trained. There were things going on there in that helicopter with her and, in the tower. There should be one eye on the plane, one set of eyes on the plane, a set of eyes on the helicopter. Instead, somebody blows out of there and there's one person that has to have set of eyes on both when the helicopter is obviously headed right into the path of the jet. That is the problem. That is because these people weren't properly vetted to do their jobs. Has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with gender or sexual identity. It has to do with, do you know how to do the job? Period.
Well, I hear, by the way, even Michelle Obama right now a lady who's worth multi-millions of dollars, former first lady. The country has accepted her and her family twice. He sat in the president's office twice, Barack Obama, and yet they still complain that they're victims. They still walk around saying, "Oh, I'm picked on because I'm a minority." And by the way, they will look at someone like Byron Donalds and call him an Uncle Tom. They'll call him all these derogatory names because they don't act as victims. They don't allow anybody to treat them, meaning Byron Donalds. They don't allow anybody to treat them as a victim. They refuse to be a victim. They stand on their own merit, and they make sure that you accept them for their achievements, not for, some racial thing. This shows how incompetent she really and truly was, Susan Rice. She didn't belong in that position. She didn't belong seated in the Oval Office advising the president.
Well, what was that opening line there again, that she said? Because that was so much of a racial diatribe. That should get her fired right now on the spot. She just proved why she's no longer needed.
Yeah, it was on a podcast. Maybe she thought she could be more loosey-goosey with her
You
comments.
shouldn't do that. I'm sorry. That's just wrong.
Well, anything you say in a podcast, by the way, nowadays, you should assume that it can end up anywhere. Anywhere.
Because they go viral.
Yeah, media is media nowadays. If you stand in front of a microphone, if you stand in front of a camera, and you move your mouth, there's a good chance that whatever you said, even if it's to a high school kid doing a school project, if you're a person of importance and you say something dumb or something important, odds are it's going to reach the world.
Well, if you say something important, odds are not so much. You say something stupid or derogatory, good chance it's going to go viral because people like that shock value, and that's what they want to throw out there, shock.
Yeah, that's true. So it's interesting. We had Susan Rice making derogatory comments about how she's being picked on. She was removed because she was a minority woman. The fact of the matter is she was totally incompetent. I heard Tucker Carlson's latest podcast where he interviewed. It was very interesting. He interviewed, and I haven't got any audio from it, unfortunately, but he interviewed a gentleman who is a reporter. He's a former U.S. Navy veteran, honorably discharged. He's married to a Russian lady, and he decided, I guess her family is from the Crimea area, and they have always been leaning Russian, not Ukrainian, even though it was part of Ukraine until 2014. So this guy, he decides he's going to be a journalist, and he's going to cover the war in the Ukraine from the Russian perspective, and he gets permission to do so. And for the past 8, 9 years, 11 years, whatever, he's been out there with his camera shooting video of the war in the Ukraine from a Russian perspective. He said out of all of the reporters who are out there covering the story about that war, and there are thousands, only one person is covering it from the Russian side. And it's not because they can't get credentials. It's because they have no interest in covering the war from that side, that perspective. They only want to cover it from the side where they have a more appealing and general narrative. So it's if you have the time, it's about an hour's worth of an interview. Tucker Carlson, you might want to listen to it because he gets into some interesting stuff. It's a much bloodier war than we're being told. There are tens of thousands of innocent citizens who have died because of this war. And it's not going to be resolved in a positive way for Ukraine because they just don't have the numbers.
They can't win it anyway, anyhow. There's no way.
Yeah, no, they can't. And I thought it was very positive to see President Trump seated in the Vatican with Zelensky and discussing the war. Trump is serious. He wants to end that war, and Trump is a man on a mission. He promised that he would do everything in his power to end wars, and he's doing just that. He's trying to stop a conflict in the Middle East between Iran and Israel, and he's trying to stop the war in the Ukraine.
You know, if you pay attention to what's really going on and tune out the nattering nabobs of negativism, and just listen to Trump and what he's doing, he's really trying hard to deliver on his promises and go above and beyond that. He doesn't want war, he wants peace. But that doesn't mean that he's not prepared to go to war. You've got to ask for peace and to ask for resolve. You got to be ready to back it up with might. And he is, but he doesn't want that. He wants peace.
Yeah.
Every move he makes, he wants to give it a chance to work. That's what he wants.
Well, I think he's getting closer, I think. And every time I hear him talk, he has something positive to say about it. I think there's a 2-week deadline that was started about 4 days ago. So he has put some urgency into the message. And I think that's what they were talking about at the Vatican.
Mm-hmm. Well, Putin, does he want peace or not want peace? I think Putin was a former KGB agent, so he's a very calculated type person. But that doesn't mean he doesn't want peace. He's tried for it before. He's asked for it before, but a lot of things have been shoved in his face, and he'll go back to his KGB tactics. But I think, what does he want in this? What is Putin asking for?
Well, he wants, he's already agreed, they say, to the fact that he's not going to get all the land they've conquered. They're going to have to relinquish some of it back to Ukraine. But he's going to get to keep Crimea, which he's had since 2014, I believe. And I believe another area. But he's not going to get the whole country.
All right. So let's put this in terms of a relationship. Unless somebody's totally wrong in something, it's not, one side gets all and the other side gets nothing. That's an abusive relationship. There's going to be a little bit of hurt, a little bit of give on each side. So he's not going to be the victor in this, and neither is Zelensky. But they're going to settle with something they can both agree on. So they both give up a little bit.
John Kerry was at the funeral in Rome over the weekend, former Secretary of State, and he was very defensive when he was talking about Crimea. And listen for yourself.
You were Secretary of State when Russia annexed Crimea, and I want to ask
when
you
they stated
they stated
not, we did not allow them to annex it,
right?
And we stood up
they
against it and called it
theirs.
against international law. Yeah, they said it. But that
can I
doesn't,
ask you
under
about,
international law, that does not make it theirs.
Can I ask you what?
Boy, talk about being defensive. But if I remember correctly, because I was paying attention back then, he didn't do anything to stop it. He didn't. If he was upset about it, it was in private circles. I didn't hear him going on the public stage and criticizing Russia. Maybe he did. Maybe I missed it. But now he's trying to talk about it like he was adamant that it shouldn't have happened. I don't think that was the case.
Well, why don't we just move on and let's get to a resolve with this thing and get it behind.
Well, that would be what Trump wants, I think, Bill. But I don't think. I think there's a group of people in the world that are not at the negotiating table.
Right, and what is it that they want?
Well, they want the war to continue because they're making billions of dollars.
Right, and that was my whole point and what I was driving towards.
Well, that's exactly what's happening. They want to keep it going because it's financially lucrative for them.
Yeah, so it's about money. It's always about money.
Well, it's interesting. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, was on with Martha Raddatz over the weekend, and he's you can tell he's fed up with the fake media. Now this is a guy.
Right.
This is a guy who's not. He's normally kind of reserved, but here's what he said.
When I look at some of the things that are being published, there was a story 10 days ago that said this is the worst April for the stock market since the Great Depression. 10 days later, the NASDAQ is now up on the month of April, and I haven't seen a story that says, "Oh, stock market has biggest bounce back ever." So
it certainly has gone back and forth.
I think a lot of this is media driven.
I think it is too. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talking with Martha Raddatz, no fan of the Trump administration. But it's true. It's one-sided, Bill. They'll tell you it's the worst decline in history. And then when the next day it goes up and it's the biggest increase, they'll mum's the word.
There's going to be give and take and everything, but, it gets down to the tariffs. They're going, oh, it's bad news. All the nattering, people of negativity were sitting there going, should never do this. And even people that were pundits to not do tariffs are being surprised because all of a sudden things are turning around. China, which was trying to play hardball, is loosening up because they're in trouble right now. Their economy's in trouble.
They are, but they aren't. Did you hear what they did over the weekend? Chinese airlines are refusing to take delivery of Boeing aircraft amid the ongoing trade standoff between the United States and their country. Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg told CNBC on Wednesday that his company had 3 737 MAX airplanes in China all ready for delivery. Boeing has since flown 2 of the planes back to the U.S. and plans to bring the third back soon. Brand new, shiny, multi-million-dollar aircraft built specifically for Chinese airlines not being accepted.
Yeah, I think, though, that was decided before a little bit of Z's turnaround. And you know what? There's probably going to be a way to sit there and take that and throw it back in their face. I'm sure there's other buyers out there. Hey, if you haven't done so lately, please like and share the show.
So what do they do with those airplanes, you think, Bill? What do you think? Do you think those, I mean, I guess Boeing could take them back, probably repaint them, repurpose them, and sell them to somebody else, I would think. It's not like
there's a lot of things. Maybe the government might sit there and say, you know what, this could be actually a nice, backup plane for this or that, or it could be used. Another airline out there could sit there and go, if you look at all the fleet, it's aging. So somebody could add 1, 2, or 3 planes to their fleet.
I mean, it would make sense, Bill, that the government pick them up. Seriously. I would think that Trump would probably do that in a heartbeat because he likes new, shiny stuff. And if he says if Boeing says, look, we can repaint them and repurpose them probably within 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, and how much are these planes?
Well, I would imagine they're probably around $20 or $30 million. These planes, these aren't cheap. These are 737 MAX.
All right. So you sit there, somebody of certain wealth could sit there and buy these planes. And, there was something interesting that was done with a rock group. And I'm bringing it up for a purpose here.
Yeah.
Iron Maiden. The guy that was the lead singer actually learned to fly a 747. So he could fly his band around. They had a plane. Well, that plane, when they sold it, went to use a couple of other places. And then they said, it's going to the scrapyard. So a company came in and said, you know what? We're going to take this and make, little key tag things out of this plane. And they sold out all of them and made the cost of the plane and then some. And I'm like going, could you imagine? I'm just saying for a hypothetical here. Trump goes, you know what? We're going to refit one of those planes. I'm going to buy it, going to turn that into the new Trump plane. We're going to take the old Trump plane. We're going to scrap her, and we're going to make them into Trump 47
Trump keychains.
I'd buy one.
Yeah,
I'd be
I
in
would
line
too.
to buy one.
I said $20-30 million. The list price for a new Boeing 737 MAX is around $120 million, brand new.
All right.
$120 million.
So what? For somebody that's in the billions, they could do something like that, and I bet you they could sit there and take their fan base and more than pay for that, and like do that commemorative thing. I'm just saying, take a page from somewhere else and just do that, and that would smack China right in the face.
Yeah. Well, China is up against the wall. You said it a little while ago. They are their economy's in tough shape, and they're trying to look as if they're not terribly bothered by our stance, but they are. Do you also hear what they did over the weekend? What was announced over the weekend?
What's that?
They took possession of a reef island off of the western coast of the Philippines. It was apparently unaffiliated or whatever it was, but
so they took it.
They said now this is part of China, and you've got to be concerned because when they do stuff like that, they end up enhancing it. They end up building it up, and it ends up being like an airport or a missile base or something else you have to worry about. They're not moving people there. It's not going to be a vacation island. So this is right off the western coast of the Philippines. You don't like to see that.
And they'll build up reefs to build, like you said, build up the ground, put an airport there, something like that. Not a good thing. They're trying to flex their muscle, but the simple fact is, like you said, they are in financial trouble, and they're in really bad trouble. The tariffs, believe it or not, are already taking effect. And I had a story somewhere here, but basically, in a nutshell, the tariffs have already all of a sudden spiked to where we are in the plus. I mean, billions of dollars, and I forget where it is. It's something like 13 or $20 billion or something like that. But the tariffs are starting to pay off, and all these people that were sitting there saying, "I don't believe in tariffs," are all of a sudden going, "Actually, this is working."
Yeah,
and it's going to really work faster than we thought. And so you take these negative numbers that they're really trying to push on the left.
Yeah.
Well, they're probably trying to push them to get people to keep that tariff news out of the news limelight. And then the other thing is, if they can do anything to derail the tariffs, they don't care about our own well-being, our economy. It's about their message and their power.
When you are wondering whether the tariffs are a good idea, just remember there's no better time than right now to fix them. It's not going to be better off in 6 months or a year or 2 years to fix them. It'll be harder to fix them. With every progressive day, we become more dependent on China in the old situation. Right now, Trump has put the brakes on that, and that's going to make a world of a difference down the road. When we start manufacturing our own things again, when you start seeing on labels "Made in the USA" all over again, that's going to mean a lot. That means that we're self-sufficient again, which is what we've got to become that way. Everything we rely on for the past 30 years has been Chinese.
Just to put a number on that, so I'm not, you're going, oh, he didn't know the number. Apparently, Trump's tariffs, they broke a record with $15 billion revenue surge in the month. Oh, we're still in it, April.
Yeah.
So that's what it did. It's up 60% in April. And they were talking about how negative it was the first week of April and maybe into the midweek. And all of a sudden, it's kicking in. And now it's working. And it's kicking in a little bit early, I would think. I would have thought it would have gone on longer. But it's kicking in, and $15 billion revenue surge.
And you know what else he's talking about? He announced that the focus will be on less taxes for people who make under $200,000 a year, meaning, or possibly no income tax for people who make less than $200,000 a year.
Yeah,
I mean that's that's going by itself that will kick start a lot of our economy.
Yes. Now the interesting thing is Trump, and it was a left group that did it. The Democrats actually said this. His appeal, and the Democrats don't understand it, are to people that make less than $100,000 a year. His core support comes from working class mainstream Americans. And they're going, we just don't understand that. And then they're sitting there going, but then they go, we don't understand how these people, the majority of people around today, make less than $100,000 a year, and they support Trump. On the other hand, they're going, well, to fight Trump, we got to fight oligarchy. Wait, you're the oligarchs. You know, you're the ones. They're taking everything and twisting it.
Well, that's all they can do right now because they have no answers.
Yeah.
They have no logical alternative answers, no solutions. All they do is complain about what Trump is doing. Trump man bad. We'll do that for the next 3.5 years and we'll get elected. I don't think so. That's just my opinion.
Let me ask you this. You know, racially, were we, I'm not saying there wasn't racism. You know, throughout history, there has been racism in every country all over the world. So I'm not denying that. But would you say that as we progressed into the 70s and the 80s and got into the 90s, that we were kind of getting away from, you know, as much of the racism that used to be?
Yes.
But, you know, when Obama came along, things kind of turned and Biden got in. They went to hell in a handbasket.
You know,
And yet,
as a kid growing up in the 60s, I saw more racism back then, even when I was a little kid. You know, you saw racism, and it was kind of accepted. But you also saw the change over the decades. And like you said, Bill, by the 90s and the early 2000s, I felt that we'd really come a long way. We really were more accepting of each other as people, which is the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Then Obama gets into office, and it was like someone stuck a stick in a moving bicycle wheel. It was like, boom, it stopped. It stopped. Everything stopped. All of a sudden, things were divisive again. We should have taken him seriously when he said we're just a few days away from fundamentally changing the United States or, you know, our country. If that's what he said, Obama said it, and we should have believed him. Ben Carson and the Government Accountability Institute president and best-selling author Peter Schweizer were on Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo. They talked about another hot topic, which is everywhere nowadays on college campuses, anti-Semitism and how the colleges are indoctrinating kids to think about the situation. They literally are encouraging anti-Semitism. This is Peter Schweizer and Ben Carson.
Joining me now is former HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson and the president of the Government Accountability Institute, Peter Schweizer. Gentlemen, great to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Carson, kicking things off with you, why can't we stop anti-Semitism in America?
Well, you know, a lot of people think that this is of recent origin, but this has been going on for a long time. If you go back and look at the congressional record, January the 10th, 1963, Congressman Herlong listed 45 of the goals of communism in America. One of them was to gain control of our school systems and teacher unions so you can indoctrinate the kids. So now we're seeing the fruit of that indoctrination. The Marxists understand this very well. That's why Vladimir Lenin said, give me your children to teach for 4 years, and the seed that I sow will never be uprooted. And it's so essential that the Trump administration recognize this, which they clearly do, and act against it. You know, he's asked all the federal agencies within the next 60 days to list all the tools that they have to fight anti-Semitism and to put them into action. We have to be vigorous in this fight because this is very serious.
Well, one of the issues here, Peter, is that foreign nations, some of them adversarial, have sent so much money to American universities. Tell us about the flow of funds.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Maria. And here's the thing. They are required by federal law, the National Education Act, to disclose large donations from overseas. The problem is sometimes they simply don't report them, or they purposely hide them. So, for example, if you are Qatar and you want to fund American universities and you set up a foundation in Canada and you send those donations to an American university, the university lists it as a Canadian donation, not as a donation from Qatar. That's in fact what happened with Li Ka-shing, the Chinese billionaire who is linked to the CCP. He donates millions to the University of California at Berkeley, but it's not listed as a Chinese donation. It's listed as a Canadian donation. And what we know, Maria, based on what fundraisers in the university setting will tell you, is that these foreign donations, unlike a lot of the American donors, have strings attached to those donations. They don't want just buildings named after them. They want to influence the curriculum and what our young people are talking in terms of what Dr. Carson was saying earlier.
That's exactly right. And isn't it true that there are some universities right now that are trying to hide the fact that they've gotten so much money from China? What is China getting in return? Is this how China has been able to steal all of that intellectual property over the last several decades?
Well, I think
yes,
clearly
it is.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, no, I think there's no question about it. It's not only technology theft, it's affecting this atmosphere on campus. I wrote in my book, Red-Handed, about the situation at Yale. You have Joe Tsai, the co-founder, the current chairman of Alibaba, who's donated hundreds of millions of dollars to Yale University. By the way, those donations are listed as being from Guernsey, which is a tax shelter off the UK coast. They're not even listed by Yale as Chinese donations. And when you talk to people who are of Uyghur background, who are Tibetan, they will say that free speech at Yale has been stifled because the university does not want to offend these powerful, large Chinese donors. And that's happening on other campuses as well.
And Dr. Carson, President Trump knew this in his first term. That's why they took down that professor at Harvard who did not disclose what he was sending to communist China.
Absolutely. He's been talking about this for a long time. The encouraging thing, Maria, is that I've been going to a lot of universities recently and seeing the work of TPUSA and the Young Americans Foundation. And a lot of students who used to stand in the corner and look at their shoes and were afraid to speak up are now speaking up and are proud of their conservative roots. So I think there is real hope. But all of us have to remember that you cannot be the land of the free if not the home of the brave.
But do you believe, Dr. Carson, that this is all outside agitators that are spreading this hate on campus? Or is it also students that are American and who agree with that kind of sentiment?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of our own students have been infected, and they've been taught for a very long time things that are completely untrue. What we've done as a society is we've allowed the academic community to take what's normal and make it abnormal, and take what's abnormal and try to normalize it. And it's craziness. And all we have to do is bring back common sense, which will thwart most of these ideological fallacies that are being put forth.
Peter, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, these universities are not entitled to this federal money. The federal government puts all kinds of restrictions or requirements on federal contractors. They certainly, I think, legitimately are raising these questions and should tie them. If these institutions want federal research dollars, they should reform themselves. And if they don't, they should go on and conduct themselves the way that they would like to. A university like Harvard today is basically a hedge fund with a university attached to it. They have $53 billion. And if they decide they don't want to reform in these real, genuine ways, then good riddance. Let them walk off and they can fund their own activities entirely.
I mean, Dr. Carson, is anti-Semitism any different than discrimination against the African-American community?
It really isn't. It's the same kind of situation. And remember, our government did step in at that time also, when there was marked unfairness going on, particularly in the South. and it made a difference, and it will make a difference now. So steady.
It needs to stop. Gentlemen, thank you. Important conversation. Dr. Ben Carson and Peter Schweitzer, we so appreciate your time. Thank you, gentlemen.
Maria Bartiromo with Peter Schweitzer and Dr. Ben Carson yesterday on her Sunday morning program. And, it's interesting. I was thinking about how the left has treated Ben Carson. Ben Carson is a gifted and world-respected heart surgeon. He's somebody who has literally opened people's chests and had their lives in his hands, and he has saved their lives and given them a new future. And they criticize him as being an Uncle Tom. The left does. And he's, if anything, he should be lifted up as being an example of what anybody can do. He came out of a poor Detroit, I think it was a single mother environment, and he ended up being a giant in his field and in politics too. And he also has a mannerism, a quality about him that is so even keel. It's so balanced. He's not terribly excited, but he's very knowledgeable. What he said about the left, especially the colleges, is they've taken what's normal and made it abnormal, and what's abnormal and made it normal, which is so true. You see, with the universities, I think Harvard initiated this. They're going after other schools, like I guess other Ivy League schools, Princeton, Brown, Yale, and they're trying to get them to go along with a plan to form a group to protest, essentially, what the government is doing. They're really upset they're not getting their $2 billion, or I guess it's $9 billion.
Well, it's not their money to begin with.
No, it isn't their money. It's our money. And why should your kid, who didn't get accepted at Harvard, be paying for that money?
That's exactly it.
It doesn't make sense.
And if they want to do all these weird things that they do, they've got the money. They've got a jackpot of money. They've got a big stash of money.
They do.
So if they want to sit there and go off-road, do it with your own money.
They have, I think I read it was $53 billion worth of endowment money. $53 billion. That's not bad. That'll keep them going. You might want to remind them about what they can do to help continue to make our program succeed, Bill.
Best thing they can do is like and share.
So anyway, the other interesting story, Bill, I wanted to play. We talked about this on Saturday, and I really think this lady was killed. Virginia Giuffre, I guess her name is. She was the Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew victim, and they're saying that she committed suicide on her farm in Australia. Now,
highly doubt that.
She's from Florida, and she couldn't get further away from the United States if she tried. Western Australia is way out there. But it's also kind of secluded, and who knows what happened to her out there. But we're not the only one thinking that way. I saw a ex-post from Mike Lee, the senator from Utah. He didn't believe it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she didn't believe that it was suicide either. It's just too convenient for the other side. She says that, Virginia Giuffre says that if anything happens to me, I'm not suicidal. I'm not suicidal. I would never do that. So what happens? She commits suicide? Nah, I don't believe that. Here's her talking on a I don't know exactly what show she was on, but this was talking about the abuse that she suffered. Listen, this is the lady who they say committed suicide over the weekend in Australia.
First time in London, I was so young. Keelan woke me up in the morning and said, "You're going to meet a prince today." I didn't know at that point that I was going to be trafficked to that prince. And then that night, Prince Andrew came to her house in London, and we went out to Club Tramp. Prince Andrew got me alcohol. It was in the VIP section. I'm pretty sure it was vodka. Prince Andrew was like, "Let's dance together." And I was like, okay. And we leave Club Tramp, and I hop in the car with Ghislaine and Jeffrey. And Ghislaine said he's coming back to the house. and I want you to do for him what you do for Epstein. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that even royalty were involved.
This is a 14-year-old girl. This is a little girl. Now, she died at 41. They say that she was a suicide victim. By the way, even if she did it at her own hand, in my opinion, it was Epstein and Prince Andrew who literally pulled the trigger, figuratively pulled the trigger. They took a little girl, 14 years old, and crushed her soul. So, in my opinion, but I also don't think that too many people would get in trouble if she speaks. And she said that.
Yeah, she said a while back that if I ever commit suicide, she goes, I'm sane. I'm not suicidal. So if you ever hear that I did, I didn't. And I would believe that. I mean, when somebody sits there and takes and traffics your body, takes your body against your will, or they indoctrinate you into something that you morally know. There's a moral code that is in your mind from birth. You know right from wrong. You do that. And even if you're doing something that they kind of indoctrinated you into, you still know it's wrong. And at some point in time, kids are trusting, but they took advantage of them. And this is in their mind. So, yeah, you'd want to escape from that. And you'd be afraid of any outcome.
She is, she's gone, the poor lady, but it makes a lot of people ask, where the hell are the Epstein files? Why don't we have them now?
Yeah, why did Epstein himself commit suicide when he was on suicide watch? That doesn't make sense when you really think about it. If you just back this bus up and just retrace the steps, it does not make sense. But the only thing that makes sense is maybe he held a one key piece of information that could bring down something even more, that's bigger and more evil than him.
Yeah, well,
and she holds a part of that same key, or she held a part of that same key.
Whatever it is, it's got to be big, because I'll tell you, people like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, when they weren't in the positions that they were in now, when they were just JQ Public right out there like you and I, they were saying, oh, the first thing I'll do is get the Epstein files and I'll throw them out there. The world will see the file. I heard them say it. Mm-hmm. So now they've been in the position to do something for the past couple of months, and it's like nothing, crickets.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, it might be easier to say you're going to do it than to physically do it. But with that said, and with the history of what's going on, and let's just say that you found a way you could get in and get that information. Now the question is, get the goods, or talk to somebody and get evidence. Would you feel secure coming out that you would be able to get out, get away, and give that information? Or do you think you just put yourself on, a short life list, and you're probably not going to make it to see the light of the next day?
I'd like to think that if you're in a position like that, you have the final say and the authority to handle it. But then you hear stories about what happened to President Kennedy. President Kennedy, they're saying, he knew he was a target. Mm-hmm. He talked about it with aides, that he was about to be hit, essentially. He expected it to happen. And now there's word running around Washington that the same kind of thing is being aimed at President Trump. Mm-hmm. And that they're not done with him yet because he's causing too many waves.
Well, I know one of two scenarios that they could possibly do, and neither are good. And I was going to point out something else, but I'll point it out later in the show because I don't want those two things to be even remotely close to each other. Maybe I'll tell it to you after the show.
Okay.
Just an observation that I made, and it's kind of a cool observation, but not one that we want to sit there and associate with this.
I mean, I got to tell you,
I think there's evil people out there, and even though we might sit there and go, oh, we got a big following and we've gotten a couple of accolades. You know, I think no matter how big you are or small you are, I think everything is monitored in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
I'm worried about him in the rallies, the rally tomorrow and the commencement ceremony in Alabama. President Trump is fearless. I mean, the guy literally came within a few millimeters from having the back of his head blown off. And yet he doesn't hesitate to go back out there and go on the stump.
One plan but lucky shot, and he's done.
Yeah.
And where that would throw our country, I'd even hate to think, because the left would come in and try to undo everything he did, but I don't know that the American public would put up with it. You know, and that's a warning to the left to just say, you know what, you're messing with, you're at a point in time, you know, you're messing with something you shouldn't mess with.
Right. But I'll tell you, I have something you should mess with.
Coffee?
Jim and Bill's right side. You got to love my lead-ins. Jim and Bill's right side coffee. A delicious medium blend roast of the finest coffee beans. It's available to you right now at rightsideshop.com. Rightsideshop.com. Also, there's a decaf version of it, too, in case you can't have the high-test version of our coffee. It's a perfect cup of coffee, a great way to start your day. If you have some liberal neighbors who you're having a hard time with, maybe, invite them over for coffee. Sit them down at the table. Put your finest little biscuits and cookies out there, maybe a few donuts, and then pour them a fresh cup of Jim and Bill's right side coffee. And, you know, you're going to see them. They'll change. They will change. You watch. After they have it, completely different.
You know, in life, as in coffee, you know, you ain't wrong when you're right. So you got to go right side coffee.
You worked on that all weekend, didn't you?
No, just about the past 30 seconds.
Okay. Anyway, you got to try Jim and Bill's right side coffee. And, you know, we've gone to no expense to bring Juan Jose and the Border Crossers here to sing our jingle.
Wake up on the right side with Right Side Coffee.
Other things going on that we wanted to talk about. 60 Minutes. Did you see 60 Minutes? I never watch it, but they were running late with programming last night. I like to watch Tracker, and they must have had a sporting event that went over, so all their programming was delayed. And so I ended up watching the very end of 60 Minutes, and I happened to watch Scott Pelley, who is so caught up in himself. He amazes himself. Every word that he says is a surprise to Scott. He gets out there and he's talking about how the head of 60 Minutes for the past 40 years has resigned, Bill Owens. Bill Owens was a legend, a leader. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, and every word that Scott says, it's dramatic. And he didn't want to resign. It wasn't something that he planned on doing, but after he saw what was happening, the landscape they were on right now, he felt it was important to do so. He said, this is one of the lines, our parent company, Paramount, is trying to complete a merger, noting that it needs approval from the Trump administration. Those bad, evil Trump people. Quote, Paramount began to supervise our content in new ways, Pelley said. Like they haven't got a right to, Scott? I mean, let me see. They pay for the cameras, and they pay for the salaries, and they pay for just about everything. And maybe they're a little concerned about the business maneuvering they're going through right now, and they want to make sure everything is non-controversial and just right. So they say, we want to see. He admits that they haven't changed anything. They just want to see what 60 Minutes is doing. And that by itself was unsatisfactory for Bill Owen, the legendary Bill Owen of 60 Minutes. They talk about him like he's some kind of a Greek god. Let me tell you what he supervised in his tenure at 60 Minutes. He allowed his staff at 60 Minutes to edit Kamala Harris's answers on one of her interviews. I'm not talking about for time. I'm not talking about trimming them so they can fit in a certain. I'm talking about taking an answer from one question and putting it into the position as an answer to another question. That is a serious edit, and it is it's a no-no in the news business.
It's a misrepresentation.
Yeah. So anyway, he said, I love the last line. The last line, he said, no one here is happy about it, meaning that he resigned. No one here is happy about it, but in resigning, Bill proved one thing. He was the right person to lead 60 Minutes all along.
Well,
I'm Scott Pelley, CBS News.
I can take that a lot of ways. The parent company is just wanting to make sure of what they're doing, that they're not getting them into trouble,
Right.
and they want to just check the credibility of stuff. So what he's saying is the guy was the right guy to lead them down the path of hate, sorrow, and despair,
And
because they lied all the way.
Well, when I was a kid, 60 Minutes was the benchmark. It was the example to the whole. Here's how you do magazine news. It was 60 Minutes, and they really did a great job. A lot of great stories were covered, but it was a whole different staff. Just because you have the name 60 Minutes and that ticking stopwatch at each segment, it doesn't
mean anything.
It doesn't mean that the stories are being done by the same kind of journalists or with the same integrity, but they sell it that way.
Well, yeah, they sell it as news, and what is the true definition of news? Their interpretation of reality is not news.
Right.
And that's an opinion. It's propaganda is what it is, and that's what they specialize in. Speaking of propagandists, MSNBC, I guess Rachel Maddow she's still there, but she's kind of taken second fiddle, third fiddle to Jen Psaki.
Well, she went back to 1 day a week, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, poor girl. She just has no common sense. She can't see past her fiction to what is really real.
I heard they were paying.
Psaki's not going to be any better.
I heard they were paying Rachel Maddow $20 million a year for doing 5 days a week. I don't know if they cut her salary back to go back to one. She went back to one, and then she went back to 5. Now she's going back to 1 again, I guess.
So what? She's down to $2 million now.
I don't think they cut her salary. I think it's $20 million. I could be wrong.
Well, I would sit there and I would look at the $20 million and look at what I was getting, and I would say, have a nice life. Don't let the door hit you where.
Well, I mean, if I were a stockholder in NBC, I would be concerned about who's driving that bus, because you want them to do the best to be successful, to make money for your business.
Yeah, I don't think Psaki is the answer because, she articulates well, but she's still spinning the same crap, and that's the problem. And people are tired of this now because not only do we have ears, but we have eyes, and we can sit there, and we have a nose too, so we can see and smell what you're trying to shovel to us, and it ain't good.
And speaking of shoveling stuff to us, do you remember Nina Jankowicz? Nina Jankowicz was the disinformation czar that Biden put in place for about 3 days. If you don't remember her, this might help you remember her.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared that intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo, and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote.
Oh, jeez.
Gag me with a pitchfork. I mean, that was.
And the funny thing is, everything she said sounds true, but it is not true. I mean,
it was disinformation.
It was disinformation.
Well, they canned that whole idea. And
so it was a dismiss, huh?
Yes, they dismissed the disinformation lady. But she didn't go away forever. She was invited recently, a couple of days ago, actually, to speak at the EU, at the European Union. This is this, the singing doofus.
I like that title, The Singing Doofus.
Yes, she would have been the singing nun, but she broke that habit.
Well, yeah.
Get it, habit. Anyway, this is Nina Jankowicz. This is what she said at the EU. Listen to this.
Before I describe the details of Russia's recent online influence campaigns, I would like to call upon you to stand firm against another autocracy, the United States of America.
That was your disinformation. She was speaking to foreign countries, telling them to stand firm against us. And this is the type of people that Joe Biden was putting into office. You had a guy who was the energy czar, who was dressing in red dresses and wore high heels, had a mustache, short hair, and liked to steal luggage. Remember him?
Sam, I think.
I think his name was Sam.
Or something like that.
Brinson, something like that. Yeah. He liked the luggage and he liked dresses, and other than that, he was a genius when it came to nuclear energy. I mean, this is the type of people that Joe Biden puts in place. He takes Pete Buttigieg, the guy who had a problem with potholes in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and makes him the head of the Department of Transportation. And
we see how that worked.
Yeah, he waited, a year to go up to East Palestine, Ohio, to talk about that disaster up there.
Well, he had a honeymoon, and then he had to take maternity leave for their adoption, and all of that stuff.
Yes. Well,
more, and I'm sorry, but when you do take a political position, I understand, forget about his how he identifies.
Right.
But, there are certain things you have to be true to your family, but there's also things to where, you take on an important role like that. You just can't willy-nilly go, well, I'm going to do this, or, well, I'm going to do that. I'll get to it when I get to it.
Have you ever noticed that in the Biden administration, they made a point of pointing out these people who were different? They talked about this guy with the red dresses. They talked about Rachel Levine, the 53-year-old guy who had a couple of kids and liked to dress as an admiral in women's clothes. He was one of the Biden administration's key people. He also they talked about all these different characters, but in the Trump administration, they have in the administration cabinet, they have some key people who have a different sexuality. They don't talk about it. That's not the important part of their life to them or to Trump. It's like when someone gets hired for a job, if you got hired for a job at like IBM, I doubt that when you walk in for your first meeting, you're going to talk about your sex. You're probably going to talk about whether you're a good engineer, whether you understand computers, or whatever you do. Your specialty.
When I hire, I'll look at the name and stuff like that, but I really get down to the meat and potatoes. Where have they worked? What have they done?
Right.
Education, and that is it. But, when you sit there and go, well, I like to wear yellow dresses. Yes, I have shaved my head, but it looks good.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Red lipstick and all these earrings.
All right, Bill Knight, the program director, right? You're hiring for a morning show. If a guy walks in, he's wearing a red dress, and he wants you to know that he likes red dresses and lipstick, and that's the key thing that he wants you to understand, right? And you're looking for a guy who's a talented personality who can get numbers and ratings for the morning show. Is that going to add to his resume, to his...
Generally speaking, no. But I would say in radio, I'm going like, okay, is this guy doing a marketing bid here to get my attention? He's got my attention, but he better back it up with a tape that says, or here's my file that you
I'm
can
not
go
talking
and listen
about
to right now.
marketing bid. I'm not talking about a guy.
Oh, no. If
This is his
that was
lifestyle.
his whole selling pitch?
Yes, this
I'd
is
be
it.
sitting there going, he would have lost me when he walked in the door. But, I will hear them out to a degree. But if that's all they're about, if that's it,
I would hear them out as I escort them to the elevator myself, but that's my own humble opinion.
no, I would just call security. No, I would actually, I would be polite and just say, we really don't have a position for you.
I mean, and look at Dr. Rachel Levine. Dr. Rachel Levine. You would think that if you're going to be involved with health and stuff like that, your big selling point wouldn't be your female uniform. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and because is that a mental disorder? Is that a health risk?
These are questions that'll have to be answered some other time because I just looked at the clock on the wall and we've once again run out of time. Oh, yes, that happens. But do not fear because tomorrow we'll be here. You like that? How it wrote? Do not fear because tomorrow.
You're a man of rhymes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, and I now just I defer to you and your traditional goodbye.
Well, my traditional goodbye. Oh, by the way, don't forget, in case we haven't reminded you several times earlier in the show, do like and share.
Yeah.
And with that note, I will just say this. Hasta la vista, baby. We're out of here.
This is CRN America.